Well, I'm delighted today to be speaking to Hannah Wailoo, who's a partner here at Withers in London. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you, David.
So really excited to be working with you on our first Riyadh event in Saudi Arabia this November. Withers well known here on the legal scene in London, but for those less familiar, it'd be great to hear a little bit more specifically about the private client team in the firm here.
So thanks, David. Yeah, so I'm a partner in the London private client team. Withers is a primarily private client focused firm, and we operate throughout the world. Our main focus is looking after families, successful people, and my practice focuses a lot on families from the Middle East region, really with a focus on that generation planning, succession planning, family businesses, and what that means for the individuals involved in those families.
And so specifically then, you might help them, formulate, look at their intentions, I suppose, for how they see their wealth devolving, and then bring a practical plan to that. But what are some of the things you might do?
Absolutely. It's about looking and working with families about their strategy for the future. And a lot of that does start with thinking about the next generation and how that's changing, what the next generations might want to do with the wealth and how they want that wealth to work for them. And also then globally, where that wealth is going globally, where they're investing, where they're starting or investing into their businesses. So there's a whole raft of things that then follow from how family businesses are planning for the next generation coming through.
Because the key Saudi families, they are global investors and often invest here in the UK, in the US. And I guess when you're looking at a succession plan, you're looking at assets in many different jurisdictions. Trying to make a plan out of that is complex, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I've been really lucky to work with a lot of families from the region who have that global footprint. And I think what we're now looking at opportunities is also what we can do locally with them and what we can do on the ground and how those local businesses are evolving. And there's a lot more opportunities for, I think, foreign advice to come in and talk more about the local issues.
Improving the governance of how those local businesses are held and run and give them a framework.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. And do you still see the appetite for London with those families? I mean, it's obviously well known that Saudi families like investing in London, but do you see any change in that, or do you see that continue?
Absolutely. I think there has always been an appetite for London, and I think that that's from all over the world. I think the Middle East as a region has always had an interest in London, and Saudi families particularly have. And that's a range of investments to personal assets and to physically wanting to spend time here. Is it changing? It always does. I think the world is always changing as to where is favoured, where's a bigger investment where you're going to get a return on your money. But I think London particularly, there's always been a pull factor. And I think that that's sort of never ending really, especially with the Saudi market.
And for our event in November, I mean, what type of contacts are you looking to engage locally? Who are you hoping to meet at the event?
So for us, we do a lot of work globally and we really, the benefits that we get are working with local advisors who know the local laws and who can guide us through local legal points, through court systems, through applications or things of where we're feeding that into our strategy. So for me on the professional level, it's really getting to know local advisors on the ground so that we can build our network of feeding in maybe a more global strategy to what they're doing and how that the sort of Saudi local elements can be fed into it.
And it enhances their offering because they're then able to make sure the advice is proper and work collaboratively with you to ensure the client's happy. And I guess also it opens up avenues and discussions with trustees and other professionals, perhaps based in the Channel Islands, but also working in Saudi market or Dubai. It can take you many directions.
Yeah, absolutely. So this strategy that we talk about when we're looking at a sort of private wealth strategy, which is so broad in terms of what families you're working with, there are many cogs that fit into what those families are going to need to make that successful. And that's going to be the wealth advisors, it's going to be the lawyers, it's going to be the trusted administrators, and all of them come together to make a kind of party of who's going to implement this well. The lawyers are not the sole people coming in, putting the strategies together. It's all about who's going to implement. So that whole group of professionals is really key to what all families need to make sure that they're implementing properly as well.
And on the governance piece, a lot of professionals talking about that and how engaging families is so important on this intergenerational piece, finding some cohesion,
Yeah.
perhaps using family charters, other instruments.
Absolutely.
I mean, how do you see it?
Absolutely. And I think that families have seen it from either, unfortunately, having something negative happening in terms of not having that in place and the conversations happening too late. I think Saudi particularly is focusing on this as a jurisdiction because there is so much wealth generated from family businesses. Economically, they can't afford for these businesses to be hit when there might be a family dispute or an issue within a family, or just the natural global nature of families diversifying and doing different things. It has to be done smoothly and it has to be done in an agreement and in a way that isn't going to harm the family business. So there's so many things that are pushing families towards really thinking about it. My understanding is that in Saudi there's a push to having an actual regulatory framework for this family governance piece, which just helps the focus, it helps with enforcement, it helps with recognition of what these documents mean. So yeah, I think family governance is globally becoming something that families more talk about, but we're seeing it a lot from families from the Middle East.
And what do you see of younger clients coming through, and perhaps also new female clients who are wealth owners now, who have got different views to perhaps generations that have gone before? I mean, what's your read on that?
Again, the next generation they're wonderful coming through.
Yeah.
You know, again, globally, the next generation are doing things as usual, the
Challenging
generations
the
before
quo.
them
Yeah.
haven't been doing. They haven't had the same opportunities to the people above them. Saudi's particularly different because actually there have unfortunately been quite a few restrictions, particularly in the female market. And that's changing so quickly that women, female members of the family, they are owners of wealth. They've always been owners of wealth, but actually who's making the decisions about the owners of that wealth and what happens with that share of the wealth that they're entitled to. So in recent years, we've seen a huge change culturally in Saudi of how women are treated and how they're seen, but that is feeding down into the families and it's feeding down into businesses. Women are decision makers, they're controllers, they're part of what the family businesses are doing. They're not just receivers of benefit anymore.
And you've been a regular visitor to the region, but also to Saudi over the last few years. I mean, what's your observations of visiting the country?
Yeah, again, I have been lucky enough that my job's taken me around the world, and I've spent time in Saudi since around 2017. I first started travelling there. And you
must have seen a lot of change in that time.
I've seen a lot of change.
Yeah.
And these are business trips, working with families, working with companies that I've been involved in. Seeing things change so quickly, I think, is what makes it different there. There's a lot of things happen, and when they say they want things to happen, it goes, and they make it happen. So you see it walking the streets in Riyadh and Jeddah. You see it in terms of transport links, facilities, all of the things that are you physically see a difference of what's happening in the country. So it's a really interesting, and it's rewarding in that sense because you see change.
And it's interesting also in the sort of international professional and jobs market as well. I was talking to one of the other sponsors about the amount of money that professionals are earning going and building, say, NEOM and others. And then if they're British but come back to the UK after having earned a lot of money, they might even need their estate planning or things like that. You know, the wealth that's being created has knock-on impact, doesn't it? People plan for it.
Absolutely. So it's the local market as well as Saudi's opening up. Saudi is welcoming people in. It wants foreign investment and it wants foreign professionals. It wants all of that input to help implement this 2030 vision. And so that comes with a whole raft of differences. And so there's a local market that are now living, working, generating wealth in the region, and that has an impact on a variety of things for our industry.
And what do you see of the London legal market in the wealth sector? Clients coming to London for advice, perhaps even where there might be a UK nexus, but perhaps there isn't. I mean, what's your read on that?
I think for us, it's the global experience. It's being able to independently sit and say, there is you have a jurisdictional footprint in many places, and there's lots of ways that can work. There's lots of disputes that can arise. There's lots of issues that can be thrown at that. As a London law firm who's been around for 125 years, our experience is being able to be independent and saying, we can look at this globally, we can help you take that setback, and we have experience of the jurisdiction, we have experience of families from the region, but we can independently advise you. And I think that's really important when there's a global footprint with families.
And within the firm here, you've got as well a range of private client specialisms from family real estate. And I imagine there's, you can put quite a team together when the client needs it, isn't it?
I think what makes us stand out is that we can pretty much service anything that gets thrown at successful, high net worth, busy families. We have teams that range from more on the corporate side to the strategy side that I've been talking about, to the disputes, to reputation management, to acquiring your assets, to disposing of your assets. We've got the expertise in there that's really geared around what families and individuals need and what goes with making those assets successful.
And you were involved recently in some events in Switzerland focused on the Middle East market, of which there's a huge advisory base. What was there any observations from those meetings? Any learnings for you?
I think from that market, from the sort of the corporate service provider market, again, it's about what the jurisdiction can bring to them in terms of there are now new regulations in the UAE and in Saudi coming through that means that our families and our clients are able to structure in many different ways now. And it's important to understand whether you're sitting in Switzerland or Jersey or Cayman, where that's going to fit in that global map of what families are doing. And I think as well for the industry, it's about making sure that as these laws develop, the regulations develop, that the professionals are there implementing and making sure it is a robust jurisdiction.
Terrific to talk to you today, Hannah, and really looking forward to seeing you in Saudi Arabia in November.
Thank you, David.
The latest technical content delivered through global conversations with professionals for professionals.